things are happening.
Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
If you follow the development of Silksong at all, you know that fans are starved of any news, so at this point, anything said by either the lead marketer Leth, or even just simple Steam updates is basically treated as like a mini event. Among these tidbits of Silksong nothings, we did get kind of a confirmation of release window for Crowsworn and release timeline for Silksong. Now, we obviously cannot with certainty say specific release dates for either, but having an actual timeline to look at is quite interesting and worth discussing. Combine that with the recent Kickstarter update for Crowsworn, and we can say with a good degree of certainty just when to expect this Crow game to release. Now, it's been 6 months since my last Crowsworn video, so we have a good bit of news to go through. But for the sake of people that don't have the patience, people that want to be spoiler-free, we'll cover the release date stuff first. So for starters, what did Leth actually say, and why? In terms of Silksong, the last true official news we got was back in May 2023, and basically confirmed they had planned to release in early 2023 but decided to delay. This doesn't give us much information because we don't know when they actually planned this. Was it early in development when they planned 2023? Was the delay decided last minute or months before? No, the only thing we have concrete is that it was delayed. Well, recently the Hollow Knight 5th anniversary hit, and naturally people expected some kind of news because it's probably the best time to release some. Instead, we got another message from Leth saying, hey, we're still working hard on the game. There was a couple game news websites that made an entire headline about it. Leth expresses frustration, and like, you gotta sympathize with him because he really is in between a rock and a hard place. He wants to interact with the community, but obviously is under NDA. So what can he do? However, a bunch of people have taken this new activity and communication and interaction combined with some behind-the-scenes Steam Silksong updates as signs that Silksong is coming soon. What does all this Silksong stuff have to do with Crowsworn? Well, someone asked if Crowsworn would release before Silksong, and Leth said no, Silksong will release first. And that's pretty big news. This might get people even more hopeful because Crowsworn fans have been hitting the copium of a mid-2024 release. I've been a little more reserved just because I have experience with Kickstarter games and especially indie games before, and especially considering the large amount of funding Mongoose Rodeo received, which they were not expecting. I've been saying late 2024 or early 2025 as a release time for Crowsworn. Combine this with Leth's comment and now people are assuming a 2024 Silksong release. And that's looking like a more and more likely scenario, but as for Crowsworn, we were all kinda wrong. Leth also basically just told Crowsworn Discord members that the game won't be out till 2025 at the earliest. Specifically 2025 or later is the time window we are looking at for Crowsworn. That seems like a pretty large development window for a game, right? The Kickstarter was in August of 2021, but the game was already in development for a good bit before that. So why is Crowsworn taking so long? Well, the recent Kickstarter post combined with facts we already know can actually shed some light on this. First off, and quickly because I've covered this before, the large amount of Kickstarter funding changed the scope of the game. New goals were hit, new possibilities were opened, there's now going to be expensive cutscenes, there's new developers. According to the Kickstarter update, as of right now, the game map of Crowsworn is about halfway complete. In the Kickstarter post, they tried to break down the size of the game using the demo size and math, but honestly, I don't really know what to think of that explanation. I don't want to get into it in this video because frankly, game length is different for everyone and most of the time devs either undershoot or overshoot how much a person can get out of a game. Suffice to say though that the game is going to be pretty big. And the number one metric that I can use for this is the amount of enemies and bosses, especially for Metroidvanias. As of right now, 50 enemies have been created, and 20 boss fights. Guys, that's already a full game. That's like already more than most modern indie Metroidvanias. But Crowsworn isn't trying to be just any other modern indie Metroidvania. Now does this mean because they are halfway done we can expect 100 enemies and 40 bosses? In one of the early Kickstarter Twitch stream interviews, Mongoose Rodeo mentioned how they were aiming for around 30 boss fights at release, which is a huge number. Just for context, most modern games of a similar type, and especially indie games, hit around like 8 to 12 bosses at most. Even higher budget ones like Ori and the Will of the Wisps only had like 6 total. If they are still aiming for a number around 30 and are only at 20, it's going to take some time to fill out the rest. Especially if we take into account this next point, which is the advanced enemy AI that Crowsworn wants to have. In most Metroidvanias, enemies are pretty static. They walk in a set pattern, they hit you for damage but keep going. Maybe they fly in a circle and shoot a projectile. But it never feels like they're aware of you, it's more like they're just danger zones. In Crowsworn, even basic enemies have actual built-in dynamic AI. For example, in the demo, there were many enemies like this staff guy that will dodge your attacks. This dude has multiple different attacks based on your position to it, and overall feels kind of like a mini-boss in its own right. Developing an AI like this is really complex and not something that indie devs generally want to put all their time into. They also want to have, for lack of a better word, different factions of enemies that fight amongst themselves to make the world feel more alive. This is the level of complexity the devs want for all of their enemies, which is just not standard for games like this. Even Hollow Knight's normal mob design is really basic, which Team Cherry is going to change in Silksong. Now with this complex AI, this means there needs to be more in-depth testing, map redesign to make the enemies work in the world, and the dev team is really small. This is all going to add more development time. Think of all the big smash hit indie games that everyone keeps playing, the games that everybody knows. Terraria, Hollow Knight, Isaac, Stardew, Dead Cells. All of these games are different, but they all share one major thing that everyone loves: content. You buy one of these and they are so well designed that you want to keep playing, and the game lets you keep playing by keeping it fresh with just enormous amounts of content. Most indie developers can't do this. All of these games I mentioned took forever to be content complete. The truth is, these games come along so rarely because most people aren't insane enough to try and make them. People may have noticed that Bow Path of the Teal Lotus got a release date for this summer. That Kickstarter took place after Crowsworn's, which is just crazy to think about. Side note, I personally can't wait to dive into Bow. It's looking fantastic so far. Obviously the scope of Bow is smaller and they did not get the funding that Crowsworn did. Bow is more of an example of what normal indie game development is like. So the map is about half done. Does that mean the game's going to take another 3 or 4 years? Not really. Game development doesn't really scale linearly. They already have the base of the game set up, the combat, how they want to approach even basic level design. So right now it's in the adding content phase. So we have a basic release window, which is 2025 or later. And we have an idea of what content is done and what needs to be added. But we can't say for sure if it will be 2025 or 2026. 2027 is a bit of a reach, and I would be really surprised if that happened. But honestly, whatever the release date is, we can be sure for now it's not really in sight, which is a little disappointing. Now let's talk about some of the more spoilery stuff. For starters, we've seen some new environments like this Metalworks factory type area. I could easily see the robot boss that we saw in the trailers being the climactic fight of this area. There's also this area with 3 doors, and it looks like you can go into at least one of them. My guess is each door unlocks with a key you find in the world, and there's like a challenge or reward behind each one. We also see some more hints of the cosmic with this chained figure in a cave, similar to the figures we saw in the demo with all that blood ritual stuff going on. We also got some new info on the protagonist. Still don't have the official name, but one thing we do know is that they are designing Crotag as over the top and flashy as the combat, while also being a learned, classy, distinguished, and cultured individual, with maximum drip, which makes me really curious as to what the whole deal is. Also, we got to look at an animation of Crotag playing an organ. Is this a minigame or just a cutscene? Not sure yet. They also showed off some of that new AI stuff they've been working on with some of the new enemies. We get to see these creepy fish slug looking guys, as well as these just badass helitroopers with flamethrowers. The steampunk aesthetic of the troopers makes them fit in the whole robot and metal factory looking area, but I could be off on that one. On Twitter, the devs also showed off basically the baby version of these slugs. So that makes me think that wherever they end up in the game, the slugs will kind of be defending their nest-like area, and the flame troopers are clearing it out or something. Also on Twitter was just some insane footage of an in-game cinematic that we finally got the full version of. Look how crazy this door looks, the center forming like an eye. Some other art assets were revealed, like this depressed man with baby crow on head, some stills of the Crotag's animations like they're about to go Super Saiyan, this awesome hand-looking enemy. There's some awesome close-up art of the guns and a couple of main character stills. We can see Sir Garen, we can see the hand boss from Grime. I mean, their Twitter is generally very active and so much for me to cover, so you should just go check all the cool stuff out yourself. The release date window is a bit painful, but thankfully we had a really good late year for games in 2023, and we still have some amazing stuff this year to look forward to, like Bow, the Elden Ring DLC, the Lies of P DLC, Stellar